Launch your career at one of Michigan's premier cybersecurity centers. At Eastern Michigan University, nearly 100% of EMU grads land jobs at some of the nation's biggest names in cybersecurity. And here, you can earn your degree online or on campus in one of our flexible bachelor's and master's programs. So what are you waiting for? Get connected to a cybersecurity degree today. Visit emish.edu/cybernow.
Welcome to Reboot the World, Campus Party's first ever digital edition. We are excited to have Paul Reiser from Techtown, Detroit, who will present Building Smarter Cities with Urban Innovation. So now take it away, Paul Reiser and Emily Dabish.
Hello, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and welcome everyone to this exciting session. I hope that everyone is safe and healthy where everyone is. Again, my name is Paul Reiser. I am the Director of Detroit Urban Solutions here at Techtown Detroit, and I'm joined today by Emily Dabish of CivLab Detroit, an amazing partner, and we are excited to be with you for the next hour or so and present to you about Detroit Urban Solutions and technology's implications in solving urban challenges. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Hopefully that looks good for everyone. So going ahead and get started today. Thank you guys for joining us again. As you see in this first slide, my name is Paul Reiser, again, Director of Detroit Urban Solutions here at Techtown Detroit. And I'll be presenting today with Emily Dabish from CivLab. So today, we're with you to discuss really how we are looking at the utilization of technology to address challenges in areas and subsectors such as energy, mobility, waste management, water quality, utilization, healthcare, and other urban challenge areas that we face today. I think before we jump in that it's fair to say, and we can all agree, that these challenges are more prevalent than ever. And considering the unique challenges and complexities that we have that have really come about over the last, decades. And so it's not new things that have evolved, but they've been kind of gradually building, and we find ourselves where we are today. So I think that we really want to ask ourselves this question today and even going forward. So what does technology mean for our cities, particularly urban cities? In what ways can technology contribute to smarter cities, more connected cities that can deliver a better quality of life for all of us? And so this is really how we want to kind of set the context of the presentation today, and just using this overarching kind of umbrella definition of smart cities. And I will try, and I've been trying to actually train myself to really refer to smarter cities, because I think in many ways, and I'll talk about this a little more in the presentation, but I think all of our cities have various levels of intelligence and are smart in various ways. And I think we're all really working on ways to bring ourselves into a smarter area that is more efficient and deliver higher quality of service for our citizens. So let's kind of just use this definition that you see here on screen for today. So what's really driving kind of, the need for smarter cities and what we see as? And so I think that, there are some additional thoughts in addition to what you see here on screen. Everything here is definitely non-prescriptive, nor all-inclusive by any means. solutions. And definitely there are additional contributing factors to what's driving the need for smarter cities. But I think we have to remember, and Detroit Urban Solutions took this notion into consideration along our pathway, that every city is different. Every city has unique needs, resources, challenges, capabilities, and cities differ. We do feel that there are lessons to be learned from each other, and there are elements of what kind of maybe we can refer to as a concentric circle of sorts that can be adapted and adopted across various cities, irrespective of size. And that's really what we're going to try to kind of unpack today. In combination with the challenges that you see on screen, there are some additional contributing factors, that I think we all experience and or seen or read about, such as low levels of public awareness in the value of smart city solutions and engagement in shaping these solutions. So all too often, we've seen examples of where cities and smart city strategies are developed without the inclusion of some sectors of our community. There's obviously a scarcity of sustainable financing models for smart city investments that could really try to help move us beyond pilots to larger scale implementation. And Emily will touch on that a little bit later as well. And then one other thing that comes to mind is this lack of kind of national standards that, there's so many different ways of approaching developing a smarter city. And we need national standards and practices that cities can adopt, and limited models that are available to us to enable collaboration. So more shared best practices, I think, could really benefit all of us. So I'm gonna move to slide 4 here. So why do we place, emphasis on building smarter cities? And like, again, I emphasize the word smarter because it's my opinion that cities are in fact already smart. They already have existing levels of intelligence and can be defined as differently as a smart city. In fact, I would say that many, if not most cities, are currently implementing tools, solutions, strategies, et cetera, that will do things like help officials learn about more people, learn more about people and how they're using cities. Improve efficiencies and infrastructure and optimizing the use of resources that we all have. And then, of course, something that's top of mind and heart of a lot is improving public safety in cities. So with this in mind, I try to defer from speaking as if cities are not already smart, but we are all seeking methods and best practices tools that can improve upon our current state, and realizing that ever improving quality of life for residents that we're all striving towards. So these are just some of the key impact areas and opportunities, but like I said, by no means all inclusive, but just some things to consider and thinking about if you haven't already. But I think that from what we've seen in our work, many cities are already moving down the path of a lot of these impact areas and seeing and realizing outcomes, which we'll also talk about today in a general sense, but also in a sense that is very acute to what we're seeing here in the city of Detroit. So I'm going to turn it over for the next few slides to Emily and let her speak about more on what it takes to move the needle kind of forward, and a bit more about even the technology and what's important as cities take these steps forward. So Emily, you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks, Paul. And hello to everyone today. So I want to talk a little bit about thinking through what it is that allows new smart city technologies to actually be implemented in cities and various communities. And what we've found through working with both the private sector and public sector is that there's a convening of stakeholders that is often required. Very often we're seeing companies have begun to pilot or implement different solutions in cities where ordinances and partners have created open environments that are conducive to implementation. So very frequently, we're seeing policies oftentimes create the necessary mechanisms for smart city technologies to move forward. Very frequently, the framework for smart city technologies requires access to city assets, and where cities always want to be competitive and are always seeking to create the best circumstances for their residents, sometimes it takes a little bit of information sharing and policy background to allow smart city technologies to take hold. So as often a first step, we see policies and ordinances as key to allowing implementation for new tech, for urban tech. With that, since these policies can be seen as avant-garde, the technologies sometimes are unfamiliar, but the value can be understood. It takes local champions, both inside and outside of government, for an understanding and an awareness, which we'll discuss in a little bit, to move forward. So whether it's a local champion in a planning department, a mobility department, or coming from community organizers, these are always important keys. With that, once there's a framework, the players that want to become involved in supporting this framework, companies often are bringing to the table the products that are able to be deployed. And on top of that, the digital deployments tied together with all of these previous discussed steps. But something that's often seen too is we see these projects that are going into pilot mode that are, relegated to one area of a city or a community. And something that's important to take into consideration is how are all residents affected? How can smart city technologies positively benefit the greatest amount of people? And that comes from discussions and understandings of ubiquity and how to integrate policies and product deployments into the existing infrastructure of a city. And something else, moving on to the next slide, is we want to consider too, while we're working with various stakeholders and thinking through what is best for residents, what does it mean to create ubiquitous technology that is accessible for all, we need to contemplate who is technology for. And very often we see the conversation of urban versus rural come to the table, whether it is looking at statewide policies or national policies. But what I've personally found is that when it comes to urban tech and to smart city tech, the basic infrastructure that allows for further deployments and community benefits is true beyond borders. It isn't just what benefits an urban community or a rural community. For instance, looking at some of the most basic IoT deployments or looking at internet deployments where it is at a level that is accessible for people to, to do their homework, to read the news, to get in touch with city services, there is a requirement for access and awareness for various companies to not just do the pilot in one place, but to look at things more holistically. So when federal, policy regulators and folks at the state and city level are thinking through, is this a urban thing or a rural thing? Very often we should be thinking about, or I believe we should be thinking about, what's best for everyone. How do we, boost the experience of technology and access so that no group is left behind? And how do we think about policies that can extend beyond different borders? And so I'd like to also talk about the needs of residents first. In Detroit, there is a stark digital divide that has often been misunderstood. There have been a variety of statistics showing stats that are simplified to say who has an internet subscription and who does not. And that very often has been the definition of who is online and who is not. And so frequently it's been a misnomer that Detroiters, and this is true in various rural and various urban areas, are simply not online. And I think that this is an example of understanding who a product is for, who a policy is for. It's very important to first understand the community that you're working with so that whatever the deployment is not simply a trinket, but something that will be taken into use and not be abandoned or be stuck into pilot mode. With this example of the digital divide in Detroit, something that was learned is that Detroiters are not on the internet because there is a common, lack of internet subscription in the community. But we learned, for instance, that people were sharing internet subscriptions, utilizing hotspots at different neighborhood locations, whether that's a McDonald's or a library. And maybe the most important thing that we learned from this particular study is that Detroiters were in fact going online mostly through mobile usage. So we might begin to think about how to create mobile connections that are strong enough or provide hardware that is diligent enough that folks and kids can access city services, do their homework, and creating an environment where we're thinking about what residents are actually using and not make assumptions, for instance, that people generally are not online. And I think that that sort of framework for thinking is very key when we're looking at how do we work with cities, how do we work with communities. So, Paul, I'll hand it back off to you.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Emily. Appreciate it. So I think you raised some critical points, and I know we'll unpack this a little bit more in the presentation, but I'm going to turn to some additional elements even of urban cities that we've noticed via months of research, due diligence, city visits, conversations with a variety of city leaders and their citizens. And what you see on screen is just some of the kind of overarching themes that have come out of some of this research. Keeping in mind, any pathway toward a smarter and more efficient quality of life is in fact a journey. It's absolutely not a race. So I think some cities or some municipalities or some communities can get discouraged by what they view as maybe lack of monumental kind of success or milestone achievement. But this is a project by project, community by community, and city by city kind of approach that we feel needs to be taken. Collaboration and citizens are absolutely at the core and very key to any strategies that are developed. So strategies and solutions must be developed for them, with them, and by them. So there's huge economic and societal shifts, much like when the internet was introduced, but we can approach solutions in a manner where solutions are not created for citizens, but by citizens. So let's utilize smart city strategies and projects as an opportunity to really, as Emily emphasized, to engage citizens at as many levels as possible, and particularly from the beginning. So the elements in front of you are some takeaways that we realize, like I said, both in Detroit and other cities across the country and even internationally, as we sit at an international border here in the city of Detroit. Techtown, in fact, sits just 15, 20 minutes from Ontario. And so we do a tremendous amount of work in collaborative work with our cross-border partners, and we seek to learn as much and share as much as possible with them as well. We found that in summary, there are some fundamental shared and key elements that most cities appear to be focused on, and within projects that are surrounded by measurable milestones. Obviously, measurement is key with goals and objectives. So some of the key things that, I think of and what we learned and what we heard was obviously a deep focus on people. So this includes access to health services, to ensuring healthy lifestyles, to reducing wait times for service delivery. This all spills kind of into governance as well. We've heard things such as leadership is key, clear divisions of responsibility amongst government agencies or government departments and municipal agencies. The continuous monitoring and reporting importance. Obviously, transparency and it needs to be top of mind, and also clear, thoughtful planning strategies, as well as the need for changes in public procurement. So how do we actually, as citizens or as innovators and as startups, actually work with city government, as again, Emily alluded to ensure kind of reduced friction in that process. So another key element was safety, and that, it was reduction in traffic accidents, reduction in crime rates, also access to other services such as public transportation, quality of the public transportation that is provided, access to public and even commercial amenities in cities and in geographies, and then even flexibility in delivering services and things like improved access to mobility solutions, which is paramount in a city like Detroit. Quality of housing in our built environment is something that came up multiple times. And, that's delivery of housing options, of course, but also increased access to green space, to design of spaces with a sense of place. And then urban outdoor, recreation opportunities are vital and key as well that we've heard. On the other end is energy and the mitigation or misuse of energy. So reduce CO2 carbon emissions, reduction in life cycle energy and annual energy consumption, increased use of renewable energy production as well. And then, of course, climate resiliency are key elements that came up in this bucket. And last but not least, and like I mentioned, this is by no means all inclusive, but innovation continued to come up and be a point of discussion relative to talent and access to talent, involvement of extraordinary, really professionals who really want to commit themselves to the strategy that is co-developed within cities. Also, quality of open data. And, there's definitely different considerations when we mention that word of open data. There's fears, there's apprehensions in the use of open data. And we've even probably all seen and or read about the misuse of open data, but it can be used in a valuable way. And those are some of the things, like I said, that really came up, as well as interoperability amongst companies, universities, startups, departments within cities. Interoperability definitely came up as a key element. So next slide is really intended to, and I know it's a slightly busy slide, but I think it's important, and it's in a relation to a lot of things that Emily and I have talked about already, but it's intended to deliver really a graphical representation of many of these important elements noted in our previous comments. So I think we have to examine all of what you see here with a lens of opportunities and also the threats that are presented in any strategies and or projects that are delivered from a political, economic, social, and even technological perspective that impact any model that is delivered or that is created and developed. So I think it's critically important for us to note and emphasize that there is an intentional level of engagement, and shown in the middle, kind of the blue and light blue aspects of this graph, that it's so important to co-create services along with the private sector and or the city created services. And so it has to be a blend of the city, municipal, and corporate perspective, as well as with the community and private citizens engagement as well. So we'll see this a little bit more in the next slide, but there are different approaches to arriving at any similar model like this. For us here in Detroit, much of this work was derived from a series of very calculated steps that involve things such as asset mapping of our region and of our city, a gap analysis that was performed to understand where there was opportunities and where there was needs that were maybe not being addressed. Community and deep partner discussions, as many as we could engage. We spent many months in these kinds of conversations with key stakeholders, key informants, to understand recommendations, understanding and examining existing work, and then understanding alternative models across the country and even, like I said, internationally, of how other cities and how other geographies are approaching this work. So slide 10 is within this, development work that we have embarked upon, or a smarter city kind of framework. Moving towards this smarter communities requires really clear goals and strategies and a vision, and that's what you see at the core of this model. And then you see 6 kind of surrounding elements that support the strategy and the vision, such as data and technology and innovation culture and skills and competencies that you also want to build with any particular strategy that can drive projects in core areas of impact. But again, notwithstanding some very common challenges that we've seen, that we experience here in Detroit, this city is no different than many other cities across the country and across the world. So slide 11 is, there's no secret that we are all being introduced to a whole new slew of technologies and social innovations that present disruption on their own, even, let alone when you have them interrelated or interconnected and they have interdependencies. So it's what we have talked about is creating this kind of perfect storm of disruption as it relates to smart cities. Many cities are, of course, like Detroit. We're grappling with identifying, manageable projects with deliberate focus that have the tangible outcomes that can be financed and can drive impact to communities and city residents. A lot of these technologies that you see on screen play a role, and some don't. And again, every city is different. We, of course, can't, I think, have this conversation without introducing and noting that COVID-19 is also impacting everything from manufacturing and highlighting the importance of accelerating digital transformation strategies. The demands of social distancing and impacting or providing impact on people's ability to work in close proximity. Obviously, we are all remote and even executing and participating in this session. But this comes at a time when organizations are already at a crucial point in their digital transformation strategies. Probably 6 to 8 cities at least across the US that we were able to either have deep conversations with or visit personally were at some level or in some portion kind of the track towards working on digital transformation and smart city strategies. So we feel like we've reached kind of this, a certain inflection point in this Industry 4.0 transformation of fast, secure, low latency kind of connectivity that is the underpinning of implementation of how implementation happens and how projects are implemented and become available to cities. So city governments are definitely working hard to adjust to this new reality of COVID-19 to drive things like urban resilience and digital transformation agendas. But we also observe an industry that needs to quantify not only the potential return on investment of investing in urban tech solutions that render us to arrive at becoming smarter cities, but also we're personally in a time that really requires an examination or us to look at, how do we reduce the cost or measure and articulate the cost of inaction. So it's up to vendors and innovators and partners who are working in these spaces to also, as you look at the ROI, but to also look at the cost, the opportunity cost of inaction. And it's up to, I think, vendors like Detroit Urban Solutions and partners that you engage in your local cities to make the case for investing in urban solutions that are oriented towards technology today and tomorrow that can provide clear competitive advantages over those that choose to wait. And so I think that there are some advantages, of course, in not being first. And I always tout that with respect to Detroit, because in some instances, in some areas of technology or technology strategies, we've been second, third, fourth, or fifth, but they provide you also a unique opportunity to learn from others who have come before you. And we definitely take pride in that. So this slide really speaks to kind of a definite positive light, what we saw across the country and internationally as well. And what we see here in the city of Detroit is that there are, in fact, there's very high interest, great projects that are happening. There's tangible and measurable outcomes and value to be delivered to residents that's really being realized. And I think it's important that you examine and discuss, as Emily again noted, who will benefit from smart city prosperity. Those, with bachelor's degrees have gone away, or some of those positions, and those with middle income have fallen to many depressed such as, cashiers, janitors have really fallen victim to automation and the transformation of our digital lives in some aspects. But I think we must be explicit about the fact that the workforce is quickly changing, of course, across the world. We see that more than ever now in the state of society that we have. And we have to make sure that we're paying attention to these implicit and explicit biases that also exist, not just from the perspective of those that are users, but it's so critical to have different people from different experiences and different backgrounds and different ethnicities to also be engaged in the upfront work to help develop these technologies, because that's where you can remove and mitigate some of the pains and challenges of these biases. So with that being said, I think job training pathways and mentorship and talent development is something that we're really keen on here in the city. And these opportunity industries that are popping up and really becoming prevalent are in many small and even mid-sized cities and large cities as well, of course, but for the upward mobility opportunities where automation is deeply impacting so many of us, or so many citizens around us. So in Detroit, we're in fact seeing great progress in many of these noted areas. The challenges and opportunities for Detroit, like many other cities, is really, I think, about harvesting the potential benefits from a number of these relevant, thriving, and or emerging sectors, such as healthcare, mobility, water, IoT, energy, you name it, ag tech as well in there. So the intersection of these subsectors is really something that's very interesting and exciting to us. So it's something that we look at from a strategy perspective as well as from an implementation perspective. So for this next slide, I'm going to turn it back over to Emily to discuss a little bit more about what we're seeing specifically and what we're attempting to deliver here in the city of Detroit and what we're really excited about as it relates to urban solutions and developing a smarter city.
Sure. So what are we doing about it? We've presented so many ideas and so many different ways to create interesting frameworks that allow for deployment of urban tech for smart city technology. So with TechTown Detroit and CivLab, we have been working together to create and to move forward with Detroit Urban Solutions. What we want Detroit Urban Solutions to be, and what Detroit Urban Solutions is not intended to necessarily be a splashy location, to be, something that is a unique piece of hardware, but we want to create a living lab. What does it mean for the intersection of mobility, digital health, civic technologies, other urban tech to come together with the various economic assets, physical assets, and networking assets in Detroit? And how can we think about, as Paul mentioned, the lessons that we've learned from other cities and from other countries, and to realize the best existing frameworks that we can use for our city, for our region? And so rather than just recreating things that are already in Detroit, how can we think about what is existing that we can bring in to create a very strong innovation ecosystem that will allow for product development, job growth, and better quality of life for the citizens that are in Detroit? So a function of this can be business incubation and acceleration, various pilots that can turn into product development, policies that strengthen this core network, and sustainability in funding through grants, partnerships, and the wants of the community and corporations, both here and outside of the city. And so we can measure that through a variety of metrics, but our outputs will be representative of the most important thing to key stakeholders, both in the public and the private sector. And again, never intending for redundancy, but thinking through what framework exists, what can we bring to the table outside of the framework that is already existing, and how can we help to bolster and develop more innovation, always thinking about the folks that are neighbors, those that are closest to us, those that are in our backyard. And so that's really been the core of our thinking as we've been developing the different programming objectives and policies tied into Detroit Urban Solutions. So, awesome. Paul, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Emily. So no city goes without challenges, and every city has its unique challenges. And so I think we would be remiss to not be open enough to share, just some of the kind of key kind of challenges for Detroit. And as I mentioned and referenced a little bit earlier, we really feel that we have to win the war on talent. Talent is so critical. We've seen in some instances the vacuum that has been created with disinvestment in education, and it has generational impacts that we have to address, not just in core private sector positions, but also in, skilled trades and other avenues where we can have access to talent and develop talent. And so this kind of plays on this importance of inclusivity, and shared prosperity. And I think really when you think about urban city development and you think about the smarter city strategies that are becoming more and more ubiquitous, I think it's important to not only think of the individuals and communities and the people that you're around and the people that are in your backyard and who are your neighbors, but also think of them in the light of how can they be on the front end and the development and share in the prosperity and the benefits of smart city solutions that are being developed. Software, sensors, infrastructure, all of these things are so critical because I think one element that we saw, which is mentioned in the third bullet, is this digital divide that we see across so many urban cities that reflected and highlighted a huge gap over time in haves and have-nots. It was obviously, I think, a big unintentional consequence of what occurred, but the access and those who have limited to no access is very, very prevalent. So I think we have to take some lessons away from what we have experienced with respect to the internet and the digital divide and understand that this huge wave of smart city strategies and projects in cities that are being developed, that we don't make the same mistakes of just engaging people at the level from an end user perspective, that can create, again, huge disparities in wealth creation, because if they can't participate as innovators and as creators, then we stand to create yet a smart city divide, just like we have a digital divide. So the growing community trust, we can't reemphasize enough. It's something that we've spent countless hours on here with community partners and building upon great relationships that TechTown and CivLab have nurtured for many, many years here in the city of Detroit, our region, and across our state. And really, like I said, using that as a trampoline to have thoughtful conversations with a wide variety of stakeholders and citizens who we also consider deep stakeholders as well, and developing that community trust, because it has to lead with that. Not with technology, not with solutions, not with smart city strategies, but with understanding what are the needs and the pain points and the desires and the differentiating kind of factors that separate not just cities, but neighborhoods to counties to, like I said, cities as well, to school districts, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that we at TechTown and some of our place-based work throughout the city and helping small service-based companies and small businesses and retail shops learned very quickly that there's no one size fits all to even strategies that are well adopted and valued, that you have to respect and admire and understand and seek to learn the differences and the unique elements of the various kind of subsections of communities. And so before we kind of close out with the last couple of slides, I'd like for you, as you continue to listen to what Emily and I talk about today, as well as what you've heard, but also as you move forward in any smart city or smarter city related conversations. Imagine you wake up in a fully realized smart city. What is your life like? What are the descriptors? What are the characteristics? What are the services that are being delivered to you? What's happening? So think about that. Maybe there's not an answer right here, right now, but I think it's something that can challenge us and challenge our municipalities and our city leaders and our partners to provide quality answers to that question. So our second to last slide before closing. So these are just a few takeaways, kind of intangible steps to consider as you move forward in your smart city strategy. So it's really around, setting and knowing your priorities, building from strengths, as I talk about. So we had to really look at what were the strengths and the key assets and differentiating capabilities of a city like Detroit. For those things, we want to kind of hone in on. We want to see who the right partners are for us to be working with. We want to be accretive to what is already going on and not in duplication to what is already working well in our region. We don't want to come across as competitive. And there's a key adjective that I have kind of gleaned from Emily and her team at CivLab, that we work to be ecosystem harmonizers. And so that's something that we take pride in here in the city of Detroit, to promote a culture of, being able to take calculated risks. We often hear that city governments are risk averse, and understandably so. But through calculated and smart partnerships, we think that we can drive the right external engagement to strengthen the capabilities of our region. And for those areas that we may not be as strong in, we still keep them on our radar. But we've led with things that we feel that we can really double down on and really bring together, as Emily and I have mentioned, that intersection of these different subsectors to deliver unique value. So it's also been mentioned, the evaluation and conducting, impact evaluations from the beginning, leading with a mindset of how will we be able to evaluate our impact on not just, private sector, and not just public sector, but also, of course, to the citizens that you are serving. So I think at this point, we are right at about 1:45. I want to kind of just reemphasize, that, we are really focused on leaving no citizen behind in our strategy. We have been at this work of Detroit Urban Solutions for approximately 1.5 years, and it was really built on a strategy that was developed multiple years ago. And of course, there's no secret, globally, Detroit experienced this fair set of challenges, from the automotive sector to the housing, municipality challenges, but we have more than rebounded, I think, and we're well on our way to a trajectory that everyone here is proud of and people around the world can be proud of. But it required us to set realistic goals, and we continue to try to set realistic goals. And we challenge you to also think about what realistic goals can you set, and that your city can achieve. Thank you, everyone, for having us. Thank you, Emily, for joining me today as well. And with that, I will exit. There we are.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul and Emily. So now we're going to transition over to a Q&A, and I have some questions ready. So the first question that I have is, how do you strategize around community-oriented development in smart city projects?
Emily, I'll let you jump in.
Sure. When you think about community-oriented development, it's important to actually listen to the needs of the community. I think it's too easy sometimes for those who are excited about products or companies that want to get into new markets to make assumptions that their product is going to solve an issue. And I think that we saw a really great example of this when we thought about the digital divide in Detroit. So many companies thought that it would be simple enough to simply blanket a better or stronger network for internet or for telecommunications across the city of Detroit. But the problem was not simply internet subscriptions. It was a matter of hardware that Detroiters were using to very frequently access city services, data, and different ways of engaging civically. So it's important to talk to the community and, for instance, learn, hey, I'm actually using a hotspot and a mobile device to do my homework or to make an appointment with the Secretary of State, rather than making an assumption that whatever product is being contemplated will be the cure-all. So often in community development or in development generally, we can say this might be better, or we think that something might be better than what is already existing. But without talking to people and understanding what their usages are, there might be a significant gap or a marginal gap that will allow a product to never move past a pilot phase or to just totally fall on its face. And so listening sessions, interviews, thoughtful surveys, and really getting to know the people that you're working with are so key in creating things that not only benefit quality of life, but will actually make a product or a company or a policy, stand up on its own and, have some longevity alongside it.
Thank you, Emily. So the next question that I have is, how do you make sure that smart city technologies get utilized and do not remain in pilot mode? How do they get funded?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And like we kind of alluded to, I think in various cities, there's different modalities and different methods and approaches to how you can make sure that pilots don't get into a mode of paralysis. And I think a lot of that work starts up front. I think it's your stakeholder engagement, your buy-in, the commitment to your ideas and the strategies. And I think when partners feel like they're a part of the plan and a part of the process, and they're not being handed a potential solution towards the end of the road, then I think you have a much better opportunity to have true engagement and true or prevention of that pilot paralysis. And as it evolves, to the point of financing, I think you do have to get into creative, smart financing strategies. And we've looked at everything from obviously grants to various sources in your community, of whether it's private sector or whether it's philanthropy, but also bringing stakeholders together where you can show value. So not only depending on those external kind of grant-based kind of cycles, but I think that one approach that we've seen that kind of works is that if in fact you can bring the right stakeholders together, and if you can actually show them the benefits, and not only to them, but to the communities that they serve and they reside in from the onset, then it becomes much easier to ask for that financial commitment down the road, because they've seen along the way what the potential outcomes are and what the impact can be, and why this is important, not only to the communities, but also to their kind of strategical, strategies as an entity, as a university, as a private sector entity, as a public entity, et cetera. So I think that engagement early on, I think we keep kind of re-emphasizing that because it's so important, but I think that can critically help.
Excellent. And all right, our last and final question before we close out is, how can we help to ensure that undeserved residents gain the benefits of new technologies in communities?
Sure. Well, if we think about underserved communities, it's often because people are not being heard in a way that is equitable. And so making sure that community organizations, community organizers are helped and involved in the creation of deployments and thinking through different policies, it's easier to create benefits and tech that is accessible to the public at large. If something is created in a silo, it often remains in a silo. So something that we are very intentional about at Detroit Urban Solutions is, who are the different stakeholders in the neighborhoods that really represent the community members, and where we might not be able to carry communications 100% across the finish line, who is capable of doing that? And how can that remain active? How can that remain live and not, begin to become stagnant? A lot of times when we're thinking about, or people have thought about reaching out to the community in the past, there is an event or one isolated way to create a conversation. It's important to maintain the conversation, think about the community that you're working with, and work with local leaders that are, great representatives.
And I'll add quickly to that. I think that something that just I was reminded of that was told to me very long ago is that if you really want to solve a problem, the best way to do that is to get as close to the problem as possible. And I think we realized that here in the city of Detroit, and we've tried to emphasize that in that presentation today, that you really have to get close and you have to keep the user, the customer, and the consumers at the center of all your work.
All right, and then we're going to close out with one question from one of our campuseros. So the question that I have today is, what is your favorite implementation of smart city strategies in Detroit?
Want to talk about some of our exciting stuff maybe that we got going underway, Emily?
Sure. So I think that especially with the pandemic, with COVID-19, we've never seen such a reminder around how important it is to have robust digital solutions accessible. And so some of the pilots and the programs that we're working on developing include looking at how can residents of neighborhoods see aggregated resources in real time of where they can access mobility solutions. You know, Detroit has been such an auto-focused town and has become very involved in investing in innovation around mobility technology. And mobility, if you think about it, can tie to access to food, access to jobs, access to health resources. So one specific area that we've really been taking a focus on is, in particular areas, in particular neighborhoods, how can residents see, how can I access all the things that are available to me that are already existing? You know, so often we see different apps for a scooter or a bike or different aggregated city resources, but we're looking at how can we combine all of these items onto a dashboard that people know how to use and they can make the best decisions for whatever their needs are. And so implementation in that way, I think, you know, is a really exciting project.
Yeah, I think we've taken a calculated process of, you know, collecting data. Data is so critically important. That's a follow-on to those community conversations and building that trust. But the data collection, whether it's pre-existing data sets, understanding where open data sets are, collecting new data, and then analyzing that data through kind of this dashboard engine kind of system that we want to develop, which then can humanize data. So how do you translate data to information? And then how do you translate information to technology-based solutions that can be low tech, moderate tech, and high tech sometimes? It doesn't always have to be the newest AI-driven or machine learning kind of focus kind of solution. Often here, for value for our citizens, it may be just an introduction or a connection to a particular resource or knowledge base that they didn't have. And so we also look simultaneously to where we can leverage technology and how we can either look at existing solutions or develop new solutions with our Living Lab and with our great partners.
All right, thank you so much. Now we're going to close out. So I just want to say thank you to both Paul and Emily, and also thank you to our sponsors of Campus Party Digital Edition USA. So with that, let's let Paul and Emily say their goodbyes, and then we will bid you adieu. So, all right. Any closing remarks, Paul and Emily, and then we will transition into our commercials. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, thank you for having us today. I know that we're both super passionate about the community that we're in and trying to think about how can we innovate without reinventing the wheel, and how can we create the best solutions for our community. And so for the viewers that are participating today, I encourage you to do the same thing. You know, what is existing in your community, and how can you, learn from other communities to utilize that existing framework to make real change. And it's really possible. And I think that whether it is corporations or your municipal government, folks are generally excited about creating better solutions for residents. And, they're waiting for the next enthusiastic person to be an innovator and to do good work. So I think that there's so many opportunities for people to get involved.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to add, I don't have much to add to that. I think Emily summed it up very well, but I'd like to remind you of that question. Imagine you wake up in a fully realized smart city. What is your life like? And use that as your challenging kind of compass in conversations internally, with friends and with other stakeholders and municipality managers and city managers to answer that question and to drive the solutions and strategies that you develop around that context. I want to say thank you for everyone for joining us. Thank you to you guys for Campus Party for providing such an amazing event. And we look forward to seeing you in Detroit in 2021.
Everybody has a passion, everybody has something that they want to share and express.
I don't think I would do well working for somebody else.
I'd love to work just as hard, but make my dreams come true.
Epicenter offers all of the resources that you would need to start a business.
Well, the space is awesome. I love working here.
They brought in subject experts on business and marketing, law.
Everyone here is very innovative.
If you want to start your business, this is the place to do it.